Full stop. Before we continue on, this podcast is made for adults by adults and is strictly 18 plus. The following episode includes sexually explicit content that will be acted out in full, and you may not be ready to hear your favorite One Piece characters in such sticky situations, so I suggest you skip this one for now. Come back and hang with us when you grow up. And now, on to the show.
What's up, Heart Parent Hoes? You're listening to the wildest podcast this side of the new world. Besties, I am taking a cue off of you. I had so many people reach out to me and say, hey, like real people do, introduce me to concepts of kink and consent and things that I had not considered or known about. So I am giving you what I think you need. I am leaning into it. Today is all about sex education and the education of education. So let's get into it. It's time for One Piece of Trash.
Bum, bum, bum.
Welcome to One Piece of Trash, the show where we make fan fiction a fan reality, except today I have a very special guest today who is going to be talking to us about why, well, we're going to be talking about a lot of things today, but one of the main things that I want to get to the bottom of, if we can, is what it is about women and AFABs consuming gay porn. This is not, like, we're not the first of our bloodline. There's that joke of, like, oh, I'm the first of my bloodline to read yaoi. No, I guarantee you are not. And boys kissing is a tale as old as time. So we are going to talk about this, and we're going to get into the education of sex education. This actually was inspired by Phantom Trash Gremlin, shout out to you, who during our interview said that their sex ed growing up in the Bible Belt south of America, not South America, but the North American South. Growing up in the Bible Belt, their sex ed came from romance novels and came from consuming this type of media. And that's not an isolated experience. So today we're going to talk about it. And with that, I will have my guest introduce yourself. So please, in true OPOD fashion, here is how we do things. I would like you to say your name, your pronouns, who you are, and whether or not you think pineapple goes on pizza.
Okay. Hi, my name is Angeline Mirenda. My pronouns are she and her. I am an artist and a sex educator, I think is the most concise way to say that. I am not the first of my bloodline to read smutty fan fiction, I would bet. Nina, my grandmother from the beyond, I know you lived on Skank Street in Queens, New York. You freaky girl. And sure, yeah, pineapple on pizza sometimes for me.
Which times?
When the mood strikes.
See,
never ham though. I'm vegetarian.
Ah, okay. But like the thing is, no one has ever offered me a pineapple lasagna or a pineapple ravioli or a pineapple spaghetti. Why? Why have we as a society done this? I will never forgive us. I wholeheartedly disagree.
Yeah.
Who said that?
I don't know. I think like that's a good point that it doesn't go on spaghetti or lasagna or ravioli because those are all literally the ingredients of
it's
pizza
the same,
in a different.
It's the same shit in a different font.
Yeah.
So what are we doing here?
I don't know.
What's really tea?
Pizza is the papyrus of the Italian world, and therefore it accepts pineapple. That's my Italian take for you.
Are you Italian?
I am. Most Sicilian, yeah.
See. First in your bloodline to eat pineapple on pizza.
That might be true. That might be true. That's fair.
And as we all know, my name is Jazzy. I'm the captain of this ship. My pronouns are shmimishmah. And you know I hate pineapple on pizza. You know I'm not about that life. But all right. Here we go. Let's get into it. So, Angeline, do you or have you ever read fan fiction? And what fandoms are you a part of?
Yeah, so, I did. I absolutely grew up on horny fan fiction. I think that's a large part of the, way I got to where I am now. I think X-Men was like maybe my first love.
Oh my god, who were your ships?
Oh, Rogue and Gambit, obviously.
Oh my god!
OTP!
Yes! Oh
yes! Also, X-Men, what is it, 97?
Uh-huh.
The reboot of it?
Yeah.
So good.
Anything else? Any other?
Yeah. I was into Teen Titans for a while.
Yes!
I had a stint in Harry Potter, but we don't do that anymore.
We all did. We've all been there, done that.
Yeah, back before we knew. Also the BBC's Merlin.
Ooh.
That was probably the last time that I went in and read fan fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But the Merlin fandom never went anywhere. The Merlin girlies are still popping up. There's new works. I see it come up all the time. I've never even seen the show, and I'm all up in y'all business.
Oh my god, they were in love with each other.
Yes.
You can't convince me otherwise.
Yep. Come on. We know what's going on here. Kiss already. The thing with the Teen Titans one really activated me like a sleeper cell, because I obsessed with Teen Titans. My Teen Titans opinion is controversial. My Teen Titans ships, I think you're all fucking up. I think you're all getting it wrong. Robin and Starfire do not make sense.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Robin and Starfire do not make sense. Starfire is too strong. She will break him. Okay? And also, I think with her bubbliness and his dark nature, she's going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting
yes.
and his emotionality, and that pisses me off.
Ooh.
Raven is a better match for Robin if they are going to be with anybody, but you keep putting Raven with Beast Boy because you guys like that golden retriever black cat thing.
Yes,
and I don't think that works here. I think that Raven and Robin have a lot to explore in a relationship dynamic. I think that Starfire and Cyborg.
Oh, interesting.
They love to eat weird food. They love to eat. They can travel the world on their stomachs.
Okay.
Cyborg is just as strong as Starfire.
Okay.
That works out. They have a similar personality. They like to be loud. And Starfire needs someone who she doesn't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting in. Starfire with Robin is, please, let's go out. Let's go to the clubs. Let's go to the parties. And Cyborg is like, girl, I already got the tickets. I'm like, we're going to meet the homegirls at the club. We're going partying. We're going to eat. We're going to all-you-can-eat buffet. That would be their relationship dynamic. I think there's so much more fun there to explore. And I think that if, in a perfect world, Beast Boy is with Tara.
I feel like our ships sometimes tell us something about our emotional journey.
Yes.
Because as a teen, I want to say I was, when I was into Teen Titans, certainly Robin and Starfire. There's some nostalgia there for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about that pairing in other forms of media now, it is an immediate turn off.
Yes.
Because I'm like, that man is going to be a pain in the ass.
In the ass. This is why I don't love Black Cat Golden Retriever pairings. Even bringing it back to One Piece, everybody is shipping Sanji with Zoro. And my opinion on Zosan, it's low-hanging fruit. These are the two characters that they hate each other. They're very opposite. And people like that opposites attract thing, but I like things to be easier than that. And I think that Luffy's brother Ace is a much better partner for Sanji.
I think there's such an interesting... Because I think if I am reading correctly, what we're kind of where we're headed with our discussion eventually, we will talk about this more. But I think there is a part of how we consider romance and what we look for in it or idealize in it or are drawn to that is actually about different or separated parts of our own psyche trying to find each other and become whole again.
Yeah.
And so I when I hear the Black Cat Golden Retriever pairing, I think what I hear is often this internal struggle within all of us of, is the world this awful, horrific place that I always must be in protection of myself against? Or is the world this place of awe and wonder that I should be curious and open and warm towards? And so in romantic pairings about that, those two things coexist within each other in a way where each is protected by the other and each is bringing the other towards kind of the beautiful center or wholeness in which both things exist together in a way that works and is about love. And so I will trash it too in terms of I'm not into the Bridgerton boys. I think they're all emotionally scented little bitches and bridges. but I understand, I think sometimes what about that becomes interesting to us because it's fantasy.
Yeah.
We might not want to live that out in real life.
Right.
I would not choose a black cat boyfriend.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm a golden retriever or a black cat.
Mm-hmm.
But like, maybe that's kind of like the fantasy of it is our psyche, like trying to kind of make sense of the world.
That is so interesting. And for me, like, I do like things easy. To me, opposites attract means you make up for everything that I lack. Mm-hmm. Opposites attract isn't like this person hates everything, this person loves everything, mm-hmm. they should be together. And I think that a lot of the times the woman or whoever is the femme presenting person in that relationship has to do that heavy lifting. Go back to Zosan. Everybody makes Sanji the bottom because he's smaller and Zora the top because he's the big muscular guy. So first of all, you're fucking up already. That's easy. It's too easy. It's too low hanging. But since Sanji is the more feminine presenting guy, we know that of all the crew, he takes the most showers and cares the most about his hygiene. He wakes up the earliest. He takes care of everybody. He's the cook. He had that stint on Momohiro where he had a pronoun shift and he was wearing dresses, and like to put this in the anime, to have this whole scene. And Oda said, the creator of One Piece said in the SBS that when Sanji was playing with gender and wearing dresses and skipping around as a girly pop on Kamabaka Queendom, he was the happiest he had ever been in his life. Mm-hmm. So you are taking this person who is more femme presenting and giving him a masculine boyfriend, and then you're making him the bottom, and like that. I feel like that is it's so telling of what people of the role that people pigeonhole women and feminine people into, is that Sanji is the service person.
Well, this is quite like a poignant part of the criticism of heterosexual like appropriation of slash fiction, right? Is that I think like a very valid criticism of it is, and this is, to be clear, like I am not against people who identify as heterosexual exploring.
Oh no, so many of my friends are hetero. Like...
Yeah. I call myself hetero flexible. But like, I think there's a very valid criticism to be made about when we are writing this in a way that is not willing to kind of explore what queer relationships actually do in reality, which is that they push and they prod and they remold these ideas we have about gender and gender essentialism, bioessentialism, like what is innate within all of us, what is innately masculine, what is innately feminine. Anyone who's listening to this who actually knows me in real life knows that like my hottest take is that I don't think masculine and feminine are good words. Ooh. I think they are not useful to us because I think we use those to stop self-reflection, to stop deeper senses of curiosity about ourselves and other people. We use them as a container that actually does not encourage like real connection. Yeah. And I understand like that we all are searching for identity and we search for markers that I think help us to understand ourselves and other people. But the thing is that the language has to be where that introspection begins, not where it ends.
Yeah. Wow. We're moving into the sex education. So before I do that, we didn't even like get to hear what your credentials are. So let's move on. Can you tell us what it is that you research and how long you have been doing it for?
Sure. Okay. So I am basically getting certified to teach sex education through SHA, or the Sexual Health Alliance. They are an organization that offers curriculums for people who want to pursue sex education, like sex coaching, sex therapy, all different kinds of kind of like sexology-centered careers. I would call myself, I'm like... my director would push back against me on this. This was like a big thing about, so Jazzy came to see a show I did at Hollywood Fringe Festival. That's how we met. My director in that was always like, you can talk about yourself like you're a sexpert. I call myself a sex enthusiast because I think I have like some innate qualms with like kind of a hierarchy of knowledge. I graduated with a theater degree, like full disclosure. I was into theater and English. Those were like what I studied in college. I've always been super interested in sex. You don't have to be credentialed or certified to teach sex education in the United States.
Hold on. That's kind of an important thing to realize. So we have a lot of international listeners who are going to be shocked to hear that.
You sweet summer
Can
children.
you say that again slower?
Okay, so you do not need any kind of credentials, instruction, curriculum, certification to teach sex education in the United States. In fact, in 2014, somewhere in like the early aughts or early, tens of 2000, there was a congressional report that was conducted that showed that like a large amount of the sex education programs in the United States that were receiving federal funding were teaching blatant misinformation. So things about like the efficacy of birth control or condoms, how effective they are. There are a lot of lies about them being like way more ineffective than they actually are. This also gets into kind of like what I would consider to be borderline emotional abuse, which is these teachings of like, they're very upsettingly, there are stories of people who went through sex education programs wherein somebody, like the teacher had them all dunk an Oreo in a glass of milk one by one, and the Oreo gets soggier and soggier as you continue dunking it. And the metaphor is, if you have sex before marriage, you are the Oreo getting dunked in the milk, becoming soggier and soggier, and therefore less useful, less functional, less lovable, less pleasing, any of those things.
Our American listeners, especially, shout out to West Virginia, who loves my podcast. Shout out to West Virginia. Many of you who probably grew up in the church or in church-based education systems will have a story about the crumpled up dollar metaphor,
the
chewed gum metaphor, or even the rose. If they take a rose and they give a petal to every single person. It's like,
Sweaty
when you get to your husband, you're empty, and blah blah blah. You'll find that this all sounds very familiar for our Bible Belt. Besties.
So that's kind of the culture that not all of us, but some of us in America grow up with concerning sex. So what do I research? I am not the person in the lab doing the research. I want to be very clear about that. I believe in intellectual integrity. I am not the person like conducting the studies. What I would consider my job to be, because my focus is specifically like creative and comedically centered sex education for young adults and adults. That is about pleasure, that is about connection, that is about self-discovery and expression. I think my job is to read those studies that other people are doing and try to translate that information into like useful tools and knowledge for everyone else.
And how long have you been on this journey?
I started studying this in January of 2022 formally. That's when I started my certification program process. Yeah.
This it's interesting that you said you read the research that the experts are doing.
Yes.
Besties, we in our lifetime are witnessing the death of expertise. We are witnessing a time in history where everybody wants to be so smart that they are not allowing people who dedicate their life to science and research and science, having expertise, being able to say, I do not know what I am talking about, so I am going to go to the people who do. I'm going to go to my local library. Not everything is a Google search away. You can pay to get your results at the top of a Google.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to say, I don't know enough, and that's okay, but someone does. Someone does, and you can go out and find that.
A big part of like why sex ed is so important to me is that I think when we yield decisions about the most intimate and vulnerable parts of ourselves, and specifically a big part of ourself that is meant to connect with other people and to introspect and express ourselves, when we yield decisions about that to another authority, which is what we do when we look to other people to decide what our sexuality should look like or feel like or whatever, we are cutting off really important parts of ourselves. And we are then like, what else are we willing to yield authority to them about? And that's why I think anytime you see fascism, anytime you see highly authoritarian regimes coming up in history, one of the first things that they are trying to undermine is usually sexual autonomy, sexual like quote unquote deviation. They are trying to put your ability to connect to yourself and your body and other people and their bodies and their lived experiences in a very specific box. And I think it's a mechanism of control. There's a reason for that.
Remember, folks, the Nazis burned books about transgender people.
First thing they did. Yep. Magnus Hirschfeld. Yep.
That's a really good segue into. Can you give us a brief history of sex education in America?
Yeah, so it's so funny because this has become like a little bit of an elevator pitch for me. I have like talked about it so many times, which is really wonderful. I think this is important news to spread. So I'm prefacing that because if it sounds like this is rehearsed, it's because I've said it a million times. You'll see 100 clips of me being like, sex ed has always been preventative and prescriptive. So to kind of give like a Spark Notes version of this, in the early 1900s, a couple of things are happening. In America specifically is what I'm talking about for this history of sex ed. There is basically in the psychological field the invention of adolescence. So prior to this, people were getting married earlier in life and they were hitting puberty later in life. Now we find that due to industrialization, due to kind of a separation of urban and suburban lifestyles or like city lifestyles, people are experiencing puberty earlier, also possibly because changes in their diet. And then they are getting married later. So what happens is there is suddenly this chasm between when people start to feel urges of sexuality and then when they have like a socially acceptable container in which to express those urges, right? That's marriage. Because of this, there starts to float in the ether this question of like, who is in charge of educating people in this in-between about what is and is not acceptable behavior from them. There is also at this moment in time an influx of immigration in the United States. My peeps, the Italians, are a big part of that. Russians also a big part of that. There's like a couple different communities that we're seeing pop up more in America. With that comes xenophobia, comes the fear of the other, and this thing that you see kind of like come again and again and again every time we deal with immigration, which is the idea of the savage, that they are more base than us, that they are less civilized, less moral, less trustworthy, and that applies to them sexually as well. So the idea of these people at this moment in time is that they are hypersexualized. They are polygamous, they are oversexed, they're going to steal or corrupt your women, and also that they carry disease, because the last kind of like leg of this trifecta stool is that venereal disease, which we now call STIs, are on the rise. Specifically, gonorrhea and syphilis is what we're talking about. At this moment in time, we do not have the antibiotics that cure them. So that means that there are like really serious health implications at that point. Now, if you get either of those things, you can take a course of antibiotics and you'll be okay. That's why it's important that we are forthright about like our sexual like history and about our testing practices. So these things kind of combine and create this question of like, I called it in the show that you saw, who leads the Night's Watch? Like, who teaches these adolescents what they're supposed to do with their sexuality? We also then start heading into World War I. When we do this, we're sending troops overseas. We believe culturally at that point that therefore they are more susceptible to disease. Again, we're sending them into the belly of the beast, the other. These foreign women are going to have sex with them, give them STIs, and that is going to compromise the American military industrial complex and our ability to achieve victory. So they decide that they're going to start teaching sex education. There is also racism is a big component of this.
Of course.
There is a lot of like, are the right people having babies? More of the right people. And when they say the right people, I think you know that really the word they mean rhymes with right. Are those people having babies? And also they do IQ tests on their, like the soldiers coming in. And what they find is that new immigrants and Black Americans are scoring low on this IQ test. Now, I want to be very, very clear. They attribute this to bioessentialism. They say these people are stupider than us.
What is bioessentialism?
Yeah, so bioessentialism is the idea that like basically it's kind of like a shitty version of fate. It's this idea that like the way that you were born, everything that you are capable of is contained in your genetics. And specifically, this is always used as a weapon to suggest that there are some people who are born with this beautiful capacity for success, rationality, morality, and that there are other people who, because of their nature, because of their biology, just cannot be trusted to attain those things. So it is 100% nature, 0% nurture. Really what's happening in those IQ tests, right, is that these people speak different languages. These people are not given education. Some of them are not literate. So
this still happens today.
Oh, yeah.
If you were unaware, in America, if in the school system, if there is a student who is from an immigrant family and does not speak English, they're sent to special ed, regardless of their mental capacity. We don't test them in their languages or even use test questions that they could understand or that are culturally relevant to them. It's just immediately, you don't speak English, special ed.
Yes.
That still happens to this day.
So because of that, America decides that it needs to be very blatant in the way it teaches sex to the soldiers. So they start talking immediately very descriptively about STIs. We kind of like flash forward a little bit. Tests show that actually the prevalence of STIs are higher in civilians than they are in the troops. So then ASHA is born, which is the American Social Hygiene Association. Notice that social hygiene is in this, so already eugenics is kind of like an undercurrent within all of this. When we get to penicillin penicillin kind of becomes more widespread around World War II in the United States. So sort of as we're heading into the 40s and 50s, suddenly STIs are less important, and sex educators, ASHA, need to pivot to find a reason that they can continue teaching sex education, because there are and have always been parents out there saying, I don't want you talking to my kids about sex. I don't trust you to do that. It's my job. So ASHA creates a new boogeyman, and that boogeyman is the threat to the nuclear family. And this becomes kind of like the foundation of the sex education that you and I received. So it's usually some form of like family living is kind of like how it's presented or packaged. It is pretty much always either abstinence or abstinence plus. So either teaching that abstinence is the only way to avoid consequences of sex, or that there are some ways to avoid, like we can use contraception, but really what we should be doing is abstinence. It's the best way. The third kind of sex education is comprehensive sex education. I am somebody who argues that even comprehensive sex education is actually, this is going to get me in trouble, not radical enough for me. Because I think that it is still founded in this idea of prescriptive sex education. There is a kind of sex that you are meant to be having, and if you have any kind of sex outside of that, then you are doing it wrong. And if you wind up lonely, or if you wind up somehow wronged, or you experience consequences from that, it's your fucking fault and you should have chosen better. Even, programs that try to be more LGBTQ like inclusive, even ones that discuss gender identity, that acknowledge like two-spirit, that acknowledge queerness, gender fluidity, intersex, asexuality, all of those things, they are still typically really pushing monogamy. And monogamy is a wonderful form of relationship and sex. It is not the only pathway available to all of us.
But and I feel like even then they treat queer sex like it is somehow dirtier.
Yeah, it feels more sexualized than heterosexual sex, for sure. So that kind of brings us to like where we are today. That's sort of the brick by brick of like the sex education that I received, that maybe you received as well. And that's therefore like what we still are contending with in the way that we relate to ourselves and to each other. And I am also someone who would argue really vehemently that it is the source of a lot of the problems that we feel interpersonally.
So when I shout out to you, Phantom Trash Gremlin, who basically opened the floodgates on this, and thank you for once again being the guinea pig of this whole project and being my first author interview. And when Phantom Trash Gremlin had mentioned that up until college their sex education came solely from romance novels because they didn't get any in school. They didn't get any in the church. Other listeners had messaged me on Instagram and TikTok and Blue Sky, and they were saying, I thought I knew about sex. I thought I knew about consent. I knew about kink, but because I finally heard One Piece Guide to Sex Ed on your show, now I really know about communication and safety. So can you speak anything to the history of women specifically, AFAB specifically, learning about sex through the media that we consume and through literature?
Yeah. So to preface again, like intellectual integrity, I'm not a historian, but I am a nerd. And so like, I do love to read about all of these things. I am pulling from and quoting from people who do study this officially. Here's like my, I think most succinct way of putting that is sex education is and has always been very focused on the bio part of biopsychosocial. So sex is a biopsychosocial phenomenon. That means that it exists at the intersection of our biology, our psychology, and the ways in which we are socialized. Heavy on the bio. I would argue often not heavy enough on the bio, because we're never actually talking about the bio in the sense of like pleasure and function of sex. It's always within the function of reproduction.
To interrupt you briefly, I was never interested in sex until I was like maybe 19 or 20, because I think what I had gotten in my mind that it was something that was so bad that I should never do it.
Yes.
But also I was taught by sex educators that it was going to hurt.
Yes.
And it was framed as something that was going to be done to my body and not something that I would be an active, willing participant in.
Okay, so this is actually the other part of the undercurrent of all of that, right? Is that women are often treated in mainstream discussions of sex as the object of sex, not the subject of it. The grammar of how we talk about sex and think about sex is very important. When we hear phrases of he fucked her, she is the object of the sentence. He is the subject. He has the autonomy. He does the action. She receives it. Objects do not have lived experiences. They do not have desires. They do not feel pain. They do not have wants. They do not have complicated feelings. They do not get self-discovery. They are an object. So it is fucking wild to me that we exist in a culture that says women naturally don't like sex, it's a product of their biology, while simultaneously ignoring the fact that their entire lives they have been treated as the object of sex that doesn't get to like sex. So early in like literature about sex, we see that it's very focused on the bio. There are 14th century advice, like marriage manuals from mothers to daughters that are kind of more about, sometimes about the mechanics of it, but usually really actually about protecting one's chastity. That is like a big theme throughout like tutorials or how to for women. And specifically, really what we're talking about when we say women is like cisgender women, or people who were assumed to be cisgender women within the scope of history. We can't know that that's how they all identified. Then we get something called baby buds eventually, which is, I think this is such a fascinating piece of lore. They don't know who actually wrote this book. They don't know if it was a man or a woman. It was probably either in like a married pair. The pseudonym used is Ellis Ethelmer. It is basically a book that disguises sex education as like feminine botany, because flowers are something that like women would be socially deemed acceptable to read or learn about. So this book is using that as a metaphor to explain with a little bit more like detail human sexuality. Then we get in 1828 something called Every Woman's Book, or What is Love. This is written by Richard Carlisle. I always like to kind of preface these things. It's an interesting read. For its time, very progressive. By my standards, not progressive enough, but that's usually the case in history. It's not very aromantic or asexual friendly. It proselytizes about the importance of love and sex a lot. It is also heavily anti-sex work and anti-abortion. But what it does do is it starts to treat men and women as more equals. Rather than like this bioessentialist notion of Mars and Venus, which kind of like prevails in the culture on and off throughout history. And also it argues that sexual urges are natural, that the repression of them is actually the thing that causes like sexual misconduct and misbehavior. And it is very pro-birth control. So this is one of the first pieces of literature that we're seeing that really I think like encourages women to have more autonomy in sexual agency, which is a huge leap for them. Then we get to what we would consider more like classic romance novels.
Oh.
And in this part, I think we start to see an address of the psychosocial part of sex. And I think that is why it is a big part of like cisgender women's education historically around sex, is because in these instances, they are the subject of sex. These are often stories that are written by women, about women, for women. That's kind of the first time that they're seeing that as like a major genre. They're very used to seeing men as the protagonists and the heroes. There are instances in which women are rewarded with love and security for being someone who expresses her individuality, who pushes back against societal norms and expectations. Think all of Jane Austen. And this is, I think, really revolutionary for them to stop and see like, oh, I have an inner life, and that inner life is being reflected back to me and being honored in a genre.
Right.
But I think this maybe speaks to some of why visual porn is less interesting to women. It's not a biological thing about like neurons firing because we are visual or not visual creatures, men and women.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's something more complicated going on, which is that by proxy of what the medium is, film is about aesthetic, and a good film, I would argue, is often also about the inner world. But porn is not usually super interested in that. Porn is, or I should say mainstream heterosexual porn is not usually that interested in that. It's usually, you know, quick, like dirty junk food sex, which is fine and fun sometimes. But I think in a world in which women are so used to being looked at and not very used to being asked about their experiences or having their experiences mirrored back to them, that is why things like erotica, fan fiction, romance novels appeal more to them. It's not the sappiness of it. It's that they are autonomous humans in it instead of an object to be viewed. I think there's an element of like what maybe gets missed is that due to the nature of how especially heterosexual women get raised to think of sex, there's this idea that like we are always protecting ourselves against people who view us as an object or as prey. Julia Serrano is this incredible trans like activist and author, and she wrote this book called Sexed Up. It is like in my top 3 books I would tell anybody to read if they are interested in sex and sexology.
Ooh, add that one to the reading list.
Yeah. So like she presents this model of predator and prey, which is also basically subject and object, that like men are the predators, women are the prey. There is inherently violence and danger involved in that framework that we all get socialized to believe. So I think some of what we're seeing when we look at like more of a slow burn is that safety is a prerequisite for women to feel comfortable engaging in sex.
Ooh, yeah.
It's not about, again, like the sappiness. It's not that she needs to be hopelessly in love and like that's the only way that women can experience and enjoy sex. Fuck that shit. I have had so many enjoyable sexual experiences with men that I do not want to date seriously.
Right.
And like, you know, vice versa. There is a prerequisite that like for her to be able to surrender to sex, which is what must happen for it to be enjoyable for both parties, we have to be present, we have to be willing to be vulnerable. She needs to know that like this is somebody who will listen to her boundaries, who cares about her well-being, who will talk to her, who will stop if she says stop, who does not want her to be in pain unless she wants to be in pain. Like I think that is where people really get mixed up in terms of how they talk about like what women need to feel sexually aroused or romanced, you know?
There are people saying that it is wrong for people who are not gay men to consume pornography about gay men. And there are people saying that there are certain things that we just shouldn't be able to look at. So there's a big debate right now about censorship in fandom spaces, about whether fanfic authors shouldn't be allowed to write about whatever they want, or even manga authors. We all live a dark romance from time to time. But what do you think that censorship in fandom is to our benefit or to our detriment?
Okay. This is such a deliciously huge and juicy question.
Yeah.
So Jazzy kind of briefed me on some of what the debate is about. I think we're answering a couple of questions. So like, I will circle back to answer this, I hope more directly at some point, but like we have to break down what we're actually talking about here. So the first question that comes to mind for me is, what is the purpose of art? That is some of what we are asking when we are talking about whether or not we should be censoring art, and who is allowed to make it and who is allowed to consume it. For me, art is very typically a framework in which we are trying to kind of process the world around us, understand the world around us, explore it, connect to ourselves, connect to each other. So then I think what we need to be doing is asking often, like, what is the intention of the art that I am creating or consuming? Sometimes this art is encouraging certain ideas, sometimes, and that might be intentional or it might be unintentional. Sometimes the art is examining a subject, and sometimes the art is just kind of for entertainment, right? It's the junk food. I think we need to be a little bit culpable in that sometimes as artists, we create things that have unintended consequences and do unintended harm. So in moments of like high conflict, something that I would stress is like, listen for the wound, and approach with warmth and curiosity. The wound I hear, I think, from people who say, like straight women especially, but like people who are not gay men should not be consuming gay romance, is we feel objectified, we feel dehumanized, we feel cast aside, we feel misrepresented, we feel like you are benefiting from aspects of our culture that you might enjoy, and at the same time, are you showing up for us when we need your allyship, when we need your protection, when we need you to introspect about the ways that you might accidentally be sort of like continuing homophobia, perhaps subconsciously. I don't ever want to discredit that. I think all of those are really, really valid concerns to be expressing.
And that is what it is when people are like, oh, Fujoshi's are objectifying gay men. That is what is being said on that side of the debate.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes that is certainly what is happening. I think there are many other instances in which the truth is just that sexuality and gender are actually really deeply complicated and nuanced things. So I went and read this paper from the Journal of Bisexuality that talks about this. And I think that this is it's a bit of a long quote, but I'm going to read it because I think it kind of succinctly is going to better say some of my feelings about it than like I could personally articulate. So this is from the Journal of Bisexuality. The article is called "What to Do If Your Inner Tomboy is a Homo: Straight Women, Bisexuality, and Pleasure in M/M Gay Romance Fictions." The questions that the author of this article thinks it's important for us to be kind of discussing and discovering are these. Who is the supposed straight woman who reads and or writes M/M gay male romances? Is she really straight or is she really gay? Is she really a woman or is she really a man? What does it mean to be really straight or to be really a woman in a society that values men over women, straights over gays and lesbians? Does it mean that a straight woman can never ever desire in ways that are not straight and that do not correspond to the gendered morphology of her actual body or her genitalia? Can a so-called woman be straight in her conscious life but be a gay man in her fantasy life? If this is so, then can such a woman manage to be a woman and straight to everyone else, but be a man and gay in her deepest, most private sense of self, as Karen Thomas, aka Dale Chase, appears to be, and not be suspected of being everything from a lesbian to a fag hag, as Thomas admits some of her heterosexual acquaintances appear to believe? In other words, do any of us always have to be what other people take us to be, or can we sometimes be someone completely different as well? Although some might argue that such questions only reify and render more stable conventional gender and sexual categories, my playful invocation of these questions here in fact is intended to destabilize as well as make a general mockery of any underlying assumptions as to the common sense and self-evident relation between the two categories, gender and sex.
Wow. That was very succinct.
I think often what happens in sex is so beautifully creative to me, and what happens in fantasy is so beautifully creative to me. And some of what you talked about when you were explaining this to me is pushback against other ideas in fan fiction, such as like rape or incest. Again, like, so important to listen to the wounds in those moments and be able to kind of discern for ourselves, is this somebody who understands my good faith and is trying to help me create things that are better in the future or more conscious in the future? Or is this somebody for whom this piece of work has invoked big feelings and they don't know what to do with those big feelings, and so perhaps they are coming out in a really imperfect way? I think we should talk a little bit about things like rape and incest as fantasy, because some of what we're seeing in 2025 is what I call like satanic panic X.0, you know, whatever fucking version of satanic panic we're on these days.
Jeez, it just keeps evolving.
Correct. So kink spaces are being very demonized. There is a lot of like pushback against caregiver little like role playing and kink dynamics because people feel that it is akin to pedophilia. Often when we're talking about sexual fantasy and sexual proclivity, what is occurring is not the most obvious answer. So if we take incest, for example, incest can be about many things. Very rarely do I think that incest fantasies are actually about a desire to go pursue incest in real life. And this is like, if that feels really difficult for you to connect with, we can have this conversation about threesomes, if that feels like a less taboo way to have it. Threesomes are a statistically high fantasy in people across the United States. How many people actually want to go pursue that, though, as like a real life endeavor? When I look at this, I use what's called the dual control sexual response model. So this is from the world of sexology. This is one of the boring research papers that none of you want to read, so I read it. Emily Nagoski is a sex educator. She also read it, and she gives, I think, like a very apt metaphor, which is that we all have sexual accelerators and sexual brakes. Different things, physical, social, psychological, press those accelerators and brakes. Something that presses the sexual accelerator pushes us towards, drives us towards desire, pleasure, joy, connection. Something that presses a sexual brake asks us to stop and step away from that. The fantasy of a threesome to many people hits a sexual accelerator. There are people who see that and who don't want to pursue it in real life, because the truth of a fantasy is that we have full control of the fantasy. We decide when it starts, we decide when it ends, we decide the damage that does or does not happen as a result of it. Once a threesome occurs in real life, we are no longer in control of that. There are two other people who are no longer figments of our imagination, so they are no longer objects within the fantasy, they are now fellow subjects, and we have to consider and manage their feelings before, during, and after the event. We also have to do that for ourselves. This can bring up feelings that we might not like in ourselves and in others. It might change the course of our relationship to ourselves, to others, and then we are left to deal with the fallout of that. That's not always a negative fallout. There are many people who pursue threesomes and have a grand old time. There are many people who engage in non-monogamy and polyamory, and they have a grand old time, and they do it responsibly and respectfully, as much as any human can. There are other people who see that and the fantasy hits an accelerator, maybe just inside their head, maybe in the context of like dirty talk between them and a partner. The reality of it hits the brakes too hard. So they don't actually want to go pursue that. Often within like role play and kink dynamics, that's kind of what's happening, right? We are also scratching different levels of the psyche. Incest to me actually might be, and this is me, theorizing. Incest might actually be about the conflict of the familiar and the forbidden for us. There is this great quote. There it is. Okay, so Jack Morin talks about this as attraction plus obstacle equals desire. Desire is different than arousal. Desire is the thing that sometimes precedes arousal, but actually...
Say that one more time. This is really important for fan fiction people.
Yeah. Okay, so this is also a sexology thing. There are models of sexual response that disclude desire altogether, Masters and Johnson specifically, because they're very focused on the biology of it. Then there are more psychologically driven models of sexuality that include desire as kind of like a separate event. So desire is the propensity to want sex. Arousal is actually the physical, the bodily reaction, the physiological reaction to effective stimuli, let's call it.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. So
you hear that, people? You hear that, asexuals?
Yeah.
Desire and arousal are two different things.
Yes.
Go ahead, continue.
And many asexuals, I think, like, identify in such a way that that language is like their experience of sex kind of proves that language.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about desire is like the yearning, the wanting.
Yes.
It's all the, like, you know, happy hormones that kind of go with that. Desire is also often what people call the spark, I would say. When we are too familiar with people, sometimes desire feels elusive to us because routine can be something that dampens that for many people. Esther Perel is another wonderful, like, sex therapist. She has this quote: "Love is about having, desire is about wanting, an expression of longing. Desire requires ongoing elusiveness. It is less concerned with where it has already been than passionate about where it still can go. But too often, as couples settle into the comforts of love, they cease to fan the flame of desire. They forget that the fire needs air." Incest is a very convenient container for those two conflicting ideologies to exist side by side. There is a familiarity of these characters that are linked to each other somehow. They grew up together, or, through, like, family, they have forged emotional intimacy. And there is also conflict that stops them from being able to easily pursue this, like, over familiarity with each other, right? And that's where the sexual tension comes from.
Besties, think about Ouran High School Host Club, the Hitachian twins. Part of what Ouran is about hentai tropes being turned upside down and humanized. So the twins, they play up the twincest for the girls who patron the host club. In the scenes when they're not working at the host club, they're just regular brothers. So that's such an interesting thing to bring up. Like this, think about Honey Senpai and Mori Senpai. Think about, like, these tropes exist when the girlies who patron the host club are looking at them. When they have their own autonomy and their own agency in the anime or in the manga, however you're consuming it, they act like regular people.
Yeah.
It's all played up.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So, like, Esther Perel also talks about friction. Friction and pressure are what makes sex enjoyable, right? Mm-hmm. If you do not, like, touch is a form of pressure, and if you are engaging in any kind of, like, penetrative sex at all, that is a form of friction. Mm-hmm. Those are what bring us pleasure and, eros and joy. Psychologically, I think that same concept also applies. That is not me advocating for people chasing toxic relationships.
Absolutely not.
What I think I'm trying to say is that within the realm of play, which is often what sex is, and within the realm of connection, which is also often what sex is, storytelling thrives in conflict. Our psyche finds, some intrigue, some play in conflict. There is therefore an obstacle in our way, and it gives us a rush to kind of surmount the obstacle. I think rape is often, rape is a form of CNC, consensual non-consent, when we're talking about it within fan fiction, because, again, it's a fantasy. Sometimes this is people sort of, like, rewriting their trauma. There are certainly cases of people for whom this is actually a healing and empowering exercise, consensual non-consent, because if it happened to them in the past, they had no control over it, right?
Right.
Somebody violated their consent, and when they said stop, it didn't stop. Now they are replaying that event, and they rewrite the history of that event, because now when it happens, it's for specifically their pleasure, not their subjugation, not dominance over them, not their pain, not abuse, for their pleasure. And if they say stop, it stops. So.
I have seen this both ways scrolling through TikTok. I have seen someone say, as a victim of child SA, we're not on the internet, I can say it, as a victim of child sexual assault, I do not believe that people should be writing fan fiction with this trope in it. I don't think that people should be writing rape. I don't think that people should be writing incest, pedophilia. None of that. I think it's disgusting, and it really hurts my heart and is very triggering to me. And scrolling in that same vertical, I saw somebody else say, this did happen to me, but I write this in my fan fiction to help me cope with my trauma. I take agency over it. This did happen to me. I am a victim, and this is how I want it done. And to me, it really just comes back to don't like, don't scroll. Me personally, I don't want to read no incest. My favorite fanfic author, one of my absolute favorites, Ghost Script, wrote in their very long form work right now, over 100 chapters. They're still releasing new chapters. There is a plot point, and we're in this right now, where if you're familiar with the character Corazon, Don Quixote Rocinante, Doflamingo's brother, Corazon and Law are they're both adults. In this world, Corazon did not raise Law, so he's not his father. But they end up in a relationship together.
Oh.
Is this my favorite thing? Nope. But I think that fan fiction is like actors, you know? When Ben Affleck was going to be Batman, people were like, Ben Affleck can't be Batman. It's Ben Affleck's job to convince you that he's the fucking Batman. It is a fanfic author's job to convince you that the world that they created is right, is cool, is good, is seamless, is a real world, is something that's down to earth, is real to them, is real to you. I want to be convinced. That's why I don't really have favorite ships. So Ghost Script created a situation in which they knew each other when Law was a kid, but he was not raised by him. So this father figure in the canon world is now a potential just age gap boyfriend in the world of this fan fiction. I can be like, okay, this isn't going to give me that squirmy feeling in my gut. I can continue on with this. I have seen fanfics that do not do that. I have seen fanfics where Law is the age that he actually is, where what happens really happens, and they still end up together. Is that for me? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't like it. I scroll past it. Whenever I see that, I don't want it. I've seen Vivi and her father. Like that. I don't like that at all. It is not for me, but I scroll past it. If you're reading something that gives you an uncomfortable feeling in your gut and that you feel the bile rise in your throat, you are allowed to stop. You don't have to continue. If you feel that feeling and you're like, let me keep going, that's okay too, because the desire to pursue the end of this story and see where they are doesn't mean that you are bad or you are dirty. Millions of people watch Law and Order SVU. You can't, like, to me, it's the same shit. Mm-hmm. Law and Order SVU has cases of rape, cases of incest, cases of, like, cults, children, teen pregnancy, child on child sexual assault, adult on adult, woman on man sexual assault. They deal with all of these issues. There are some episodes that are hard to watch, but I watch them because that is my jam. That's my show.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful way to get at, like, I think what's often happening here is that we assume that sex is like a universal experience and that we all have the same interpretation and feelings surrounding it, and that therefore there is inherent black and white, right and wrong about it. There are many other things that are going on. If we go back to kind of like a CNC, sometimes it's actually about being the object of desire, being somebody that is so desirable that it like unlocks this primal need in your partner.
Omegaverse
yeah,
girlies.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah, the pheromones, the ruts, the heat.
Yes. There's something I called the I could never, which is really actually about not having to say yes to something that the world has given you very complicated, bittersweet feelings about, and getting to enjoy the pleasure of it while still maintaining in this fantasy the charade of you being somebody who also maintained sort of like moral high ground, or like who didn't have to sacrifice dignity or like innocence or decorum to say yes to it. That person took it from you anyway. Maybe you enjoyed it within the fantasy, but you didn't actually have to wrestle with the hard feelings of saying yes to it, because that's a very complicated thing for some people. There are so many ways in which we like walk through the world, and all of that informs a very colorful, very detailed tapestry of how we experience sex. And when we look at social media, I'm on social media. I love social media for some things.
Absolutely.
Social media also is always delivering to you the most sensationalized version of any idea, because by nature of the algorithm, that is going to be the idea that gets the most engagement. It also is going to be the idea that is easiest to clip into sound bites and 90-second videos or whatever. So I think we have to be careful. There is a lot of, I think, pop science, pop psychology, pop sexology on social media. I say this lovingly, please stop getting your relationship advice from TikTok. What it's doing is it is asking you often to be in a constant state of protection against the things in the world that might be dangerous.
Right.
Narcissism, red flags, love bombing, gaslighting. All of these things are verbiage that gets used in psychoanalytic spaces, in therapy spaces, but they have been kind of like co-opted, and they are now being flung around willy-nilly. And if you only listen to the algorithms, you would think every single person you meet in the world is trying to manipulate and dominate you. And that is a huge block to connection.
That's not the way you want to move through the world.
No, because connection and community are one of our most important and powerful resources.
Yes.
That is how progress happens, care happens, change happens, revolution happens, anything, right? So all of these, I think, like unintentional, but all of these structures that would ask us to block that at every turn out of a fear of, like, out of paranoia, like, just John Ralphio it, you know, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious. I understand there's some hypocrisy in being like, be suspicious of the people telling you to be suspicious.
Right,
but
right.
Again, like, discernment, you know, an important skill.
Yep. We have a little time left. So the last question I wanted to ask you, whenever I tell a straight man about what it is that I do, they're like, what the hell do women want to do with gay porn? Like, why do they like this? So do you know if there's any like actual data, any research into this of women AFABs consuming yaoi or consuming BL?
So anytime that we're looking for a psychological why to something, we're theorizing.
Right.
Evolutionary psychologists, I'm fucking looking at you. So we can totally talk about like theories, we can talk about thoughts, we can talk about some of the research being done on that, but like there is not a hard and fast why as to this occurring.
I have heard there, shout out to Courtney of the Delusional Boyfriend Book Club, stay delusional. Courtney had said that her journey into BL manhwa and manga, into yaoi, was because of her fear of sex and sexuality, and when there were two men involved and no women, it was easier to consume because it was something that was like so far away. It wasn't a female body that
Correct.
This was being done to, and I thought that was a really interesting thing, because I wouldn't have said that were my personal reasoning for consuming this type of media.
So I think, again, this is me kind of like speaking in draft free thought. This is not something that I have like hard and fast research on. I would say that one of the big reasons that we see this being kind of like more appealing to often like cisgender heterosexual women or bisexual women or people who like transverse across the spectrum of gender, is that sex is inherently political. So anytime you are in relation with somebody else at all in the world, you are navigating systems of hierarchy, because that's the world we live in. Sex is no different than that. When we are in relation with somebody sexually, immediately you are having to navigate whatever the systems of power around you are and how they inform who each of you are. So the way that we talk about sex in the media is often in a way that comes from a patriarchal standpoint. Women are the objects, not the subjects of sex. Ableism is usually tied up in it, beauty standards and desirability, who is and is not wantable, who is and is not deserving of both sex and desire of being wanted. White supremacy. There's something called the RK selection theory. This was like at some point pseudoscience, but like at some point kind of mainstream science. This idea that there are two evolutionary strategies that result in hypersexuality and hyposexuality. Usually this is used as a point of racism. Specifically, Black people, Latinx people, people of darker pigmentation are considered to be hypersexual.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the evolutionary like strategy of have as much sex as possible to have as much offspring as possible. Then there is more resource-based like strategy, and people who are of Asian descent are usually kind of attributed to that, and that is a hyposexual idea of sexuality. And then there are the whites, which I am one of. And the whites are thought to be kind of like the Goldilocks, that they exist right in the middle at the exact correct amount of sexuality that's supposed to be happening. And we see this in the way that Black men are depicted in media, that Black women are depicted in media, that Asian men
Black
are depicted.
listeners, every time like a girl wears a short skirt, being called fast. Black girls being called fast, quote unquote, for doing things that our white counterparts were doing, and they were not being called fast.
I'm a hoe, and I've never been called fast.
All right, our bodies develop differently. You wear our hairstyles a certain way before a certain age. She fast.
Capitalism is a huge part of how we talk about sex.
Yeah.
What products do I need to fix me? Because inherently under capitalism, I cannot be desirable or lovable just as I am. You know what kills desire? Spectatoring. Spectatoring is a name for what happens when we kind of go outside of our bodies within sex, and we are watching ourselves sort of like a little ghost above head, wondering what we look like, how our partner is receiving that, whether we look stupid, whether we look fat.
Stop. Hold on. It's called spectatoring.
Spectatoring.
So remember a couple of episodes back when we talked about sexual dissociation?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a version of sexual dissociation. Yeah, you are no longer playing the sport, you're watching the sport.
I worry about my face, like what I look like. Like I literally need a play-by-play.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
This is such a huge desire and pleasure killer. The best sex I have is when I don't give a solitary fuck. I'm just there to have a good time.
So would you say that like the consumption of yaoi and the consumption of like male on male pornography from a female gaze or an AFAB perspective, like that's taking us out, or is that feeding the spectatoring, or is that taking us out of the spectatoring?
No, I think it's circumnavigating the spectatoring because her body is not a part of the equation at all, so she doesn't even have to think about it.
Right.
Yeah. And this is like, I mean, heteronormativity plays into it, and I think that's what, when we hear pushback against AFAB or cisgender or, heterosexual women consuming gay porn, that's usually what the pushback is there is a fear that they are projecting actually heteronormativity onto just two male bodies instead of understanding the nuance and the humanity and how the relationship changes when it is two men instead of a man and a woman. And I think that is my take. That's what I would tell straight men, is that when we are in relation with you, there are a million different systems of power that are informing how we think about the relationship. When it is two men, we are just enjoying the fact that they are in relation with each other, because all of the complicatedness of that falls away for us. We don't have to be scared that she's being dominated. We don't have to be scared that she is doing all the emotional labor. We don't have to be scared that like he has, usurped the alpha position and now she is falling back into a role of passivity. All of that politicalness goes away.
That's true. Like what like now that I'm really thinking about it, whenever there's a heteronormative or heterosexual relationship that you're reading about, there's always going to be a power dynamic, because there's always going to be the sense that one is meant to give and one is meant to dominate, and one is meant to receive and one is meant to be dominated, and one is meant to be nurturing and one is meant to be powerful. But when there are two men or two women, shout out to the Yuri girls, that power dynamic doesn't really exist.
Correct.
And I think that's what it is that I do not like about Zoro topping Sanji, is because you're doing the same thing.
Totally
you're
fair.
putting the power dynamic of Sanji being receiving and Zoro being like giving or dominating onto that, when first of all, Zoro is a man who works out for fun. Stretching his booty hole is another workout. I fully next episode is my 2-hour series on why Zoro is definitely a bottom. You cannot convince me.
About this.
You cannot convince me that a man who wants to push his body to and past its limits regularly, who likes battle and blood, enjoys pain, enjoys pushing his limits is not bottoming.
I think this is also like, because this is what kink helps to do too, right? Is it subverts the systems around us.
Yes.
As a switchy bitch, that is some of the joy of that for me, is the man I am with transgressing across what is expected of his gender, being soft, surrendering under me, allowing vulnerability into the space between us, giving me the reins, letting me be in a position of power over him. That is such a gift if somebody is giving that to you.
Yeah.
And we navigate that differently based on the way that we are socialized, and gender is a huge fucking part of the way that we're socialized.
And that's all the time we have for today. So if you took nothing away, just let your boyfriend peg you. Let your girlfriend peg you. Peg that man. Stretch him open.
Into it.
We'll have a manual in place. We'll use visual aids.
Oh yeah, please do your research. Please.
We'll make a downloadable PDF. You hear that? You heard it here. One Piece of Trash podcast says, that was the best. That was the most convincing argument I've ever heard for pegging a man, and I think that we should all learn how to do that. Yeah, you can.
Do you want me? Yeah. Okay. So I'll go find some stuff and post some stuff about pegging. And if you want to find that, you can find me online.
That is for real though. But that we have to get out of here. Thank you so very much to my co-hosts.
So can I just drop my handles real quick?
Please tell the listeners where to find you and what you're working on right now.
Totally. If you want to find me, I'm online. I am on Instagram as AP, as an advanced placement, sex education. You have to type the whole thing out because Instagram hates me. On TikTok, I am AP SEGGSED, because again, censorship. And if you want to email me, I am apsexualeducation@gmail.com. I'm totally happy to talk about this literally all the time. It's my favorite thing.
All right. I also like talking about sex. I think that I'm actually more on the demisexual side.
Yeah.
I didn't have any interest in sex until I was like 21, 22. And it was like, I liked talking about it and thinking about it like before any of that, but I think being a neurodivergent, being like learning that I have the HD-tism made a lot of sense, because it was like I had to fully wrap my head around and grasp it and know as much about it as possible before I could really engage with sex as an activity. So if you're neurodivergent and you can relate to that, then what up?
Can I give you a fun sign-off fact?
Please do.
Genuinely, there is research that suggests that there is a huge crossover between the kink and neurodivergent communities.
Well, I always knew.
Very cool. Yeah.
All right, let's get out of here for today. Thank you so much to my co-host, my guests, Angeline, for coming on the show, talking to us about sex ed, and like, this was incredibly eye-opening, and I have so much to take away from today, and I am so grateful to have your time. If you're a fanfic author and you want your work on the show, you can email the podcast, onepieceoftrashpod@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram or TikTok for as long as we have it on One Piece of Trash Pod. On both of the socials, I am on Blue Sky, One Piece of Trash Podcast.bsky.social, and Tumblr. Shout out to Mac, who runs the Tumblr for me, because I don't need anything else to do. One Piece of Trash Podcast. I am now opening up the floor for auditions. But if you are listening, I am opening auditions. If you want to audition to be a voice on the One Piece of Trash podcast, you need to email or message me on Instagram. If you message me on Instagram, let me know that you want to audition for the show, and I will send you a prompt. You need to say your name, your pronouns, where you are from, and whether or not you like pineapple on pizza. I need to get a feel for your voice so I know what characters I want to put you in. And you can also tell me if there is a character that you yourself would like to play. If you feel really strongly that you're a Sanji, if you feel really strongly that you're a Luffy, please let me know. Thank you all so much for listening. Fuck the police. Fuck ICE. ACAB. Fuck Trump. Let's go take a cold shower. Free Palestine.
Yeah.